Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 312, World Building Basics for the Interception. Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge,
break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, my name is Jeffrey W. Ingram, and I'm here today to talk about my indie video game. Trying to get back ahead with Michael, and we just can't seem to get synergy in our time. So we're going to be recording on Super Bowl Sunday, which is tomorrow, my time. So I need to get an episode done to have out for you guys to make sure it's done with the Super Bowl coming up. So I hope you all enjoyed the game if you watch. If you don't watch, hope you enjoyed your day anyway. Now, today I want to talk about the game I'm working on. It's an indie video game. I made some decisions for it for those of you who have been following. There's been a couple episodes where we've actually talked about it here. And now I kind of want to get a bit into the world building needs for it. As I'm starting to develop out a story, I'm starting to know that there's some needs that I have. And especially being a video game, I need a little bit better maps. I'm going to need some things to make it work. So the intention is I'm going to prototype it in RPG Maker. And if I can get to do everything I want it to there, I might just keep it there. Otherwise, something I'll probably have to end up shifting it to Unity. And so I think soon I'll be creating a subgroup in the World Builders Undercroft, our Facebook group, which you can join to by going to facebook.com/groups/Undercroft, or just search for Undercroft, and it should come up. But when you join it, there are 3 questions you need to answer to get in. Then inside there, I'll be creating a subgroup where we'll talk about like game development, and it won't necessarily need to be about video games, but that's the intention of the group. I know there's some other people interested in doing this kind of stuff too, and I think it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm going to add in as a subgroup, just so the main group can stay more about overall world building inspiration and questions, and this can be more focused for building for video games. And I'm a novice to the area. I am by no means an expert, hence indies and very, very strong quotes here. But, I do have a background in development, plus with the tools out today, I'm pretty sure I can get something done, hopefully what I want, but we'll find out. There will be some scope creep, I'm sure, as it goes through. It'll grow, and sometimes I'll learn things I can't figure out, and I might have to let go unless I can figure a path around it. So, but right now, instead of going more into how I'll be developing it, I want to talk a little bit more about what I've learned, and so far I'm started to put together a story, which we started talking about a couple episodes ago. Started talking about a basic story overview, and I'm going through creating scenes. And the idea is, in a video game, you have scenes, right? In an RPG game, where story elements happen at, and you have different conditions for what triggers them. And so the idea is I'm going to build a straight linear story through the game, sort of like a classic JRPG game. And hopefully I can add some choice to it later on. And I want to add a battle system to sort of involve some elements of domain control, like controlling a county. And going forward, the game, I want it to be kind of a hybrid between a JRPG and sort of a simple strategy game. But as I'm starting to develop out, I realize there's some things I need due to some story scenes. I'm not going to go so much into the story scenes now. I'll probably do a different episode with that later. But because of that, I've learned a few things that I need. One, we talked about this a little bit before, but I haven't been definitive. I need to know a little bit more about what I call the 7 tribes. And there are really more than 7 tribes of the Bhalfqareim culture in my world. But there are 7 ones involved here. And there's, at this point, probably not even 8, but there'll be up to 9 tribes, maybe more throughout. But really, I define a tribe as a pre-civilization society of any type. And they might even have, they have basic even cities at this point, but it's a tribal setup. It's a loose affiliation, no strong leaderships. Even the old kingdom that will be talked about in the story, which was overthrown by orcs, will exist. And so to give you a basic idea of the storyline here is you have this human kingdom called Bhalfqareim. It is actually overthrown during an orc migratory invasion, and the orcs end up, essentially using step tactics, dominate the whole area. However, essentially, the way it ended is sort of going to be the lead into the story. So the way it ended was the last king of Bhalfqareim was driven back into essentially his back against the mountains with the entire orc army descending upon him. And there was no chance of victory. The numbers were against them, but it was the remainders of what they call the 7 tribes. And they end up, in Game of Thrones terms, he bent the knee to the orc king and essentially got demoted from king to essentially a count in English medieval parlance, which I will be using because it's what I'm most familiar with. But he essentially got demoted to a count in this exact area. He had a castle where his people were held up in, which is a pretty good castle, which actually was one of the reasons why the orc warlords didn't want to. They accepted him bending the knee instead of just trying to wipe him out, because they would have been messy. It would have cost them time, a lot of time, because it was a very defensible castle in a land where the humans would still have some advantages over the mounted orcish armies. And so there are 7 tribes, essentially Bhalfqareim tribes. These original tribes are all named after weapons that signify their group. So there's the Lutteim. They are known essentially for a hatchet style, a decent sized axe, but more of like a hatchet style head, bigger than like a throwing hatchet, but definitely a decent weapon axe, which could be thrown, and is a little bit longer blade. So actually, if it hits the ground, it can roll and still hit, or bounce off the ground and bounce into targets. There's the Ichluttiem, which have a smaller blade that is really strictly a very good throwing axe. There's the Äbunluttiem, and I'm totally screwing up the names. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the names I make up here. The Äbunluttiem, and they have another style of throwing axe, which is a bit of a larger head, but it's a counterbalance on the other side to help keep it on target. There's the Bhalfqareim, and I believe that is an axle, a long polearm style weapon where there's an axe on one side and a pickaxe on the other side, and that's a weapon their tribe is known for. There is the Tracchuliem, and they are actually known for essentially a spear. They're a spear people. They've had with spears. There is the Veintraccqariem, and they're essentially that's like a long spear. They're pikemen. That's what their tribe are known for. And there's the Hirreim, and that is essentially a style of sword, roughly equivalent to a long sword. Now, nobles in all of these cultures pretty much use swords. If you know anything about swords are really good balance between offensive and a defensive weapon. You can carry them on you. They're not too much of a burden, so you can use them, get to them easily, use them quite easily. So it's typically for the nobles, it's a very standard kind of weapon. For other people, can you afford them or not is the question. And so not always, your primary weapon, the thing that identifies you to your tribe, is important. So like a Lutteim member would actually, a noble would have the axe and the sword, and he could go back and forth and fight. But the sword would probably be his main weapon. Just, it's easier to carry on you and use defensively if you need to. But I need some more information on them beyond the fact that they're named after a weapon. And it won't necessarily be a lot, but it'll be something. Their norms are going to deviate all a little bit from Bhalfqareim. Collectively, they come together to create the norms for the Bhalfqareim group, but there are going to be some subtle differences, and especially there's a group of Hirreim. Actually, I think I'm going to make it the spearmen. The Tracchuliem, and they actually conquered a very ancient civilization of people who I roughly associate with sort of very Greek style culture. So it's sort of a Germanic Greek hybrid culture. So they're radically different than their other tribe members because of their culture sort of merging with a different culture. The language is the same, but a lot of the norms have shifted away from sort of Baurhdrakkeim norms at this point. So there are definitely some differences between them and other people. But sort of in the way too, it's like they've been Spartan influenced, we'll say. So they're very headstrong and they're great warriors. So they're still important. They're still part of the tribes. And the reason why all of the tribes are located in this one spot from all of the kingdom is because it was the leftovers of the old Baurhdrakkeim king's army were allowed to settle here, but only here. And there was a special castle, essentially roughly called the Orc Danger Castle is my name for it. It's not the actual name in the language, but that's the translated name. And it's literally, it's a mountainous region with a lake in the middle where sort of the water collects from the mountains around it. And then in that lake, a river, a substantial river flows out of that flows to the coastline. But where the mountains kind of come together and the river goes through it, the orcs built a very significant castle there. Literally, my thought is it's like a cork, right? And so the idea is nothing comes in or out of this county without essentially the Duke, which is not what his title is, but essentially it'd be the local Khan, really. Whatever name I end up coming with for the step lord of the realm, who's not the emperor, but he's a high lord, so he controls a couple different counties directly, and this one indirectly through a vassal, which is at the beginning of the story the son of the old king, who is not the main character. And so I will need to know obviously that castle as well too. There's some other important areas. There's a city called Mainzphar at the mouth of the river right near the castle as well too. It's sort of the center of trade. Trade is very important here. This was an old tin mining area, which if you know anything about Bronze Age, tin is a super important, super rare metal that you need to infuse with copper to create bronze. And so the fact there's tin here makes it a wealthy area. It's not the best land, but it has some good wealth to it because of a tin deposit. And obviously we're in the Iron Age at this point. It's hilly mountainous areas. There's iron all over. And there's also some copper too. So they have a lot of mining resources, plus some trees, not a great amount, but a decent number of trees. They have some other areas for where they can grow food as well too. All the essential things, you kind of need to bring together to have what would be defined as a county. And sub-counties within there. And so all of essentially the sub-counties, their counties are broken up into 7, usually 5 parts, but here 7 parts because of what happened. And each of the old tribes is sort of given their own little fiefdom within the county. And they're all vassals to the count as well. And so, which is why I kind of need to know them, but I also need to have maps for all of them, because part of it is when the story starts, the player comes home, the father of the old king dies, or the old count dies, and he now takes his place. His grandfather was a king, but he was not. He has been gone away. He's been influenced by a different culture, the Shiftarians. So I'll need to know a little bit about the Shiftarians as well too. And his mother was actually the emperor's niece. And so she had a lot of influence in raising him because she was smuggled out to help raise the kids when the father got them out of the country before. In the early parts of the story. And really the early parts of the story is meant more as a way to give some background, but to have some excitement and fighting going on too. So it's not just like a trailer, or a lot of text to read. I don't like games where, you have to read a lot to get caught up on the world building. There'll be some scenes created to help explain the world and the setting early on. So I'll need a lot of things like this little Shiftarian area I need to know. I'm going to need a travel map of covering the areas, one to show perspective of how small this county is, how large the Orc Empire is in comparison to the human county that the story is taking place, and just so you get the idea that this human just couldn't walk back home and just overthrow the empire. Not going to happen. This is step one, which will be leading to a revolution that will happen down the road. And since each of the tribes have been given a small holding here, they'll have a fortified spot of their own. Each will be different based off of their cultural group's desires. Some very similar to the home of the player, but not as significantly built. And then a few of the other ones will actually be a little bit different. But it will kind of show how there's starting to be breakdowns in this culture, who then themselves, several hundred years before this, did the exact same thing to the humans that were living here when they invaded and took over a lot of this land. And then there's I'll need a map of the county itself and what I call travel maps, which your travel maps are going to be at least one map showing the movement of the player back to his home. And then I'll probably, as you get closer, I'll probably start bringing the map in either directly to the county, or if I have time, I'll probably build a couple transition maps to sort of give you a better feel of what it's like in the world, and that you're getting somewhere, and that there's a world beyond this area that you're in. And then the playable map, overworld map will essentially be of this one county. Now, it's relatively big, but it's also surrounded by mountains almost completely, with a small river pass through some of the less extreme mountains. So there's a lot of maps I need to build already. I've even started talking about characters or classes, right? This is a game, so they're classes. So far, the way I'm leaning is each of the tribes, there are seven different warrior classes. And essentially the major difference will be the weapon. Ergo, the damage, what they do will vary a little bit. It'll be mainly cosmetic probably, but hopefully a little bit different speed. And JRPGs isn't really a thing. It's usually a turn-based thing, but maybe like if you have they're really big weapons, it's like maybe an every other turn thing. So there might be a little bit of that, but mainly not. There's a rogue kind of class called, poets, sort of based off of a skald, which exists here too. And they'll be created as well too, because I love rogues. There will be a holy magic class, definitely. And Carver magic is the main type of magic in Bhalfqareim. But it might be harder for me to figure out how to do. But that's like another potential class I'll create as well too. So there'll be several classes. The warrior classes will be very similar. The Carver magic people and the poets are also very proficient with the hand axes. I was talking about the Lutz weapons. So they'll be around too. Now there'll be lots of characters. These will have sort of JRPG backgrounds for most of them. Some of them will have significant backgrounds because they're important. There'll be some important characters who are around in this period of time, and I'll know more of their background, and a lot of it might not be revealed at least right away, but maybe over time. We'll see how long this takes me and how much fun I have doing it and what I want to do, but it sounds like it will be a lot of fun right now. And obviously, I'm going to need a little bit with the orcs as well, too. I need to know more about their social status. I have an idea, of it, where they'll have this like high lord and a lord, which would be roughly equivalent to a count and a duke. And then they'll probably have minor kings and the king of kings, the great Khan. Being a step tribe, I love that feel. And the one thing I found, looking at Earth history, is every time step tribes collided with a civilized area in Europe, it was always looked at that they had the same kind of structure with khans and great khans. Not always a great khan, but always khans. And then there'd be like an emperor, essentially, is like a great khan, which this area does have at this point in time. So it's a little bit different in how they interact. Now, also, I have to think a little bit too about structures of military. I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to get into right away. I really need to finish fleshing out the story, but really the idea is I need to start building out a list of what I need for world building. And this is an important thing is a lot of times when you're world building, you don't think about the long-term needs of what you have. You think of like, I need a world. Well, that's great, but Earth took 5 billion years to make. A few, maybe 30 million or 130 million with actual people. Maybe 10,000, 15,000 years of what we would consider like really, truly modern people starting to come together in societies. It's really important to consider that you can never have everything. You can never complete a world. So as you put a project together, and you do this for a novel or for a role-playing game, is what are the needs? Like, obviously, this county I'm in gives me most of my needs. There will be certain other things I have to call them artifacts that I'll need too, that will come through quest objects needed to get certain clans on your side. I know that there are a couple groups of mountain orcs, which are different from the Ordassan orcs, where the players can interact with as well too. So there's actually there's 2 more locations I'll need. And if you ever play a JRPG map, you know that they're going to need to be able to go in. The overland map, I'm not sure how the battle maps are going to take place for the conflict between armies. And I haven't thought necessarily through exactly how I want to represent that as well. I'm thinking part of it will be is what is the manpower? That's an important part of the story. Because the thing is, the humans, especially the way they are, manpower is an issue. The Duke over the area can prevent more humans from coming in. So the thing is, if as the player you start smacking down heads and going through and crushing people, then the problem is ultimately you end up with, okay, I've subjugated all of the other tribes and I've united the 7 tribes in the way I want to. But now the problem is if I do that, then I maybe don't have enough manpower to take on the Duke, which is the ultimate objective of the game, is to take out the Duke. Essentially, it's to supplant the Duke. And there will not be multiple ways to really do that. This isn't going to be like the ability for the player to use courtly intrigue to supplant him. There will need to be some violence, because it's a JRPG game. But to get to the point where you can go in for that final defeat of him, armies will be needed. And if you don't have enough troops, you'll never get into a position to launch your final attack, and you'll ultimately be destroyed. And I want this game to be losable. I want you to be able to lose this game. That's something very important to me, even in the sort of solo run through. If you make certain mistakes, I want you to lose the game. I want you to feel bitter at me if you play it at times, because games that make me feel bitter because of loss over time become the better games. So, this is just what I've been working on. World building task. Go ahead and make yourself, and I've done this before, take like a story outline you're working on or a campaign outline and start listing through what do you need, like story wise, I'm coming up with scenes. And so each map I'm coming up with, I need to deal with the scene. So every scene I have, I need a map for, because it's a video game. You have to have a map for the people to visually interpret what you're saying. And some of these maps I'll need over different time periods as well too. So, the thing is, take an outline, scene by scene, create a story for yourself, right? Create your world building needs. And for your real world task of the day, Super Bowl day. This should be coming out on Super Bowl day. If it's out early, on time is technically Monday. I usually try to put them out Sunday. If it's out on Sunday, hopefully you're not listening to this until Monday, unless you're getting ahead. But the thing is, relax, have some fun. It's okay to do that. I know sometimes I get very busy at home and I start to feel guilty if I'm screwing off too much. That's a silly thing that actually hurts me in the long term. So don't be like me. Have some fun, relax, and have some fun. Okay, folks? I hope you have a great time. It was a little bit of a short episode, but I covered what I wanted to. I could go on. There will be a lot more, especially when I start creating characters. I'll probably be revisiting some of these topics, probably more focused in on them as we go on, talking about, thoughts on how I go from, a culture to maybe the way I build one of the tribal fortifications. So I hope you all have a great week, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.